Hello, everybody. Sunday night, 8 p.m., Heal with Gold show. And we're going to wait a couple of minutes until people start joining us. But I am here with Eliza Bulow, somebody that I admire so much. And I can't wait for you guys all to come in. And here you are. Say hello when you come in. I hope you approved StreamYard. Hello, salute, aloha. And yeah, so now I see that is you. So you did approve StreamYard. Anybody, if you are there, I see that there's a few people. Please approve StreamYard. So when you put your names and you comment, I see that it is you. Okay, whoever said hello right now, you didn't approve StreamYard. So all I see is Facebook user. Look, this is what I see, guys. Okay, so please approve StreamYard. If not now, next time. But without further ado, I'm bringing in Eliza Bulow, a woman who literally changed my perspective when I was going through adversity. And she, with a few words, was really managed to show me a different way of seeing my situation in a much more positive way, and which helped me so much. So I have a very special place in my heart for her, and I couldn't be more pleased to share Eliza's story with you. I'm bringing her in, and I just want to share with you that one of the things that Eliza went through is the loss of her son. He battled mental illness, and it is a gift to us that Eliza is so open about her story, because with her openness, she really enlightened us and is really able to help us see what we need to focus on, breaking the stigma of mental illness, and she will do much more justice to this subject. So, hello, Eliza. Welcome. We already have people with us, and I'll just show you that they are saying hello. This call is here from YouTube, and here we have people from Facebook, and it's just wonderful to see everybody and share your story. So, Eliza, please introduce yourself. Tell the people that are here a little bit about what you do, and then we'll go right in into your story, and you will share with us important message about the mental illness.
I have so many stories, first of all. I don't want to ever be reduced into one, even if one story is an amazing story and an important story. That's just one of many. Okay. So I'm full of stories. In fact, when we were raising our children and we were full of stories, so many things to grow through, my husband said, we're like a magazine rack. We have so many issues.
So, and guys, can I just say, look at what she said. First golden nugget. So many things to grow through. I don't know. Do you have a pad of paper and piece of paper? You can write it down. Just write it down.
And that's really what it was. Because I mean, when our first child was born, and she was just such a princess. And 16 months later, we had a son. And, you know, I grew up in the 70s where girls and boys are exactly the same thing, and you can't really tell the difference, and everybody has the same opportunities, etc., except for my daughter sat nicely and played with dolls, and my son was a crazy person that was all over the house all the time, turning everything into a gun, always. Any Barbie doll, you could lift a leg, and it was a machine gun right away, like, oh my gosh. The energy was so much. And they didn't have the words ADD at the time, but it was just coming up, and yes. So I remember I went to my mentor at the time and I said, what is going on with this child? She said, it's a test. I was like, oh, okay, it's a test. Okay. Then when my father came to visit, he said, what is going on with this child? And I said, wisely, because I knew at 23, it's a test. He said, what do you get if you pass the test? I'm like, I don't know. What do you get if you pass the test? So I had to learn more about that. So a religious perspective on tests that I learned to grow with is a test is God calling you forth to see what's your latent potential. It's not, obviously God knows if you can, if you can't. It's not that kind of a test. But if you think about what a test does in school, a test pushes you to study harder and you have a deadline. You have to prove yourself by that deadline. Not that you can't, it's just that maybe you wouldn't without the pressure. So that can be an understanding of a test. So I realized, you know what a test is? A test is where, for me, where God says, I invite you into this graduate level workshop. Look what you may learn here. And you look inside the door and you say, I don't think I want to have a mentally ill child. And God says, guess what? That's what you need. And you go to the workshop. What do you get if you pass? You get you. Bigger and stronger, more capacious, more understanding, more capable. That's what you get on the other side. It's not pass, fail, it's grow. It's how will you grow through this? So I really feel like there's two major questions you have to ask at the beginning of anything really difficult. One is how will you go through it? And the other is how will you grow through it? So go through it is what medicines are there, what therapies are there, what support mechanism can you set up? But grow through it is how will I become transformed through this? I see myself as in this world for transformation. Like everything is about transforming. And there's narrow places that you have to go through that squeeze you so tight, but that's like going through the birth canal where you're squeezed so tight and it's so uncomfortable, but out you come on the other side, a new you. And that's our opportunity to come out, but it's not once. That's what I learned. Tests just get harder. And you go through one and there's another one on the other side. But it's all about, come on. I see it as a loving God saying, come on. I see more and I want that from you. Come, give it to me. It's like a loving father saying, you could walk towards me. Come on, you could do it. Walk towards me. And then a parent steps further back and further back to bring us forward so that we can reach more and accomplish more. So that's something that I've worked with all these years. And I started with the small test of ADD and moved through each child more and more and more until my youngest child, number 6, was definitely, I don't know if he was born with mental illness, but it was from a very young age, I'd say 4 or 5, by 5 already. He was so curious. One day, he asked me all kinds of questions. How did they build buildings bigger than cranes? If you poke a hole in an electric cord, will the electricity come spurting out? What makes mattresses bouncy? Like, he wants to understand the whole world. One day we were in the garden, and he's number 5 of a lot of, it's number 6 of a lot of children. And I babysat also. I was like tired all the time. He said, Ema, are there a lot of ants in this garden? And I said, yes, there are. He said, and are ants good diggers? I said, yes, they are. He said, how much do you think an ant could dig in a day? I said, I don't know. He said, it's not an I don't know question. It's a what do you think question.
Wow.
So at 5, he was taking me to task. It's a what do you think? Don't tell me I don't know because you don't feel like thinking about it. What do you think? That's what he wanted to know. And he kept me on my toes all the time. What do you think? All the time. But starting around then, also around 5, is when he decided he was not happy being in this world. And he told me that. He said, Ema, I didn't ask to come here, and I don't want to stay. And at that time, we lived near the ocean. And he told me, like, he would say, I mean, not only didn't he want to be here, but he would tell me how. He would say, I just want to walk into traffic, or I just want to walk into the ocean and keep on going. So, and I spoke to, at first, of course, I was mortified. What is a 5-year-old child telling you they want to die? What is that? But you could actually get used to a lot. And the conversations became kind of normal, all the way down to, he would say, I don't want to brush my teeth. And he said, why should I even brush my teeth if I'm going to be dead tomorrow? And I would just say, so the worms will have less to eat. Let's just get the plaque off of those teeth. And it was just like a regular conversation because why? I don't want to do my homework if I'm just going to be dead tomorrow anyway. I'm just like, just do it in case you're not, so that you'll have it to take to school. And there were definitely harder times and easier times. And it actually, I think mental illness often not always is progressive. And he definitely progressed, and it was difficult, more and more difficult. And teachers understood less and less. And I didn't understand. I mean, he was the sixth, and I had had kids with lots of issues, learning disabilities and some health concerns, asthma, serious asthma, hospitalizations from a different child in asthma, and like really like nebulizing, all kinds of stuff. But this one, like everything that I learned, nothing helped, nothing. The only thing that I could bring from all the parenting experience I had to this child was my patience and myself. There were no techniques, there was no knowledge, and there was no book, there was no internet at the time. Nothing was available to help me. I just had to walk that path alone, which I did. And a husband who was definitely supportive of me, but also was scared of this whole thing and busy working. So it was my job. And dealing with all the other kids around a mentally ill child. It's not an easy thing. And to not even know for sure if he's mentally ill, like part of the early challenges, I'm dealing with such a challenging child, and then all the blame in the community, as everybody says, like, what kind of a mother are you that you allow a child to whatever it is, dress that way, look that way, talk that way, smell that way, eat that way, run that way, whatever it is. What kind of a mother are you that allows a child to do that? I just felt like, I'm a loving mother. That's what kind of mother I am. I take care of my child. He became very, very interested in computers, which is a thing that happens for some. I think in the end, the diagnosis was Asperger's and bipolar disorder. But what I learned about diagnosis, here's just if you are writing notes, is don't. Not because you don't want to label a child, but because once you do, you stop asking any questions. So a diagnosis along the way was depression. But if you land on depression, then you don't ask other questions like, why is he staying up all night? That's not part of depression. Like, you can't even ask about bipolar if you know for sure it's depression. And I think we in science didn't believe at the time that there could be a bipolar in such young children. And who knows if there was at that time, if it took a while for that to come out. But if you know, you stop asking. And I'll just give you my classic example of that, because I think it's so important to not diagnose, but to just talk about a bouquet of symptoms. So I'll give you, for instance, I had a child who, very precocious, very sleepy, very spacey. I mean, this kid totally made it on smarts in school, but would fall asleep at the drop of a hat and was spaced out all the time. Constantly losing things. I had like 3 pairs of shoes when other kids only had 1 for this one, 3 coats. Like the kids always losing shoes, coats, lunch bags, everything, always. Not finishing things all the time. Fine. That kid starts to take Adderall twice a day, 60 milligrams, and is basically making it through life with all that. Diagnosed with ADD, Adderall, that's the drug. Just taking it twice a day, a lot. We switched psychiatrists. The new psychiatrist asks this 11-year-old, precocious 11-year-old, how much attention medicine do you take? She's having none of it. Attention medicine, she knows that it's dexedrine, extended release. So she's like, well, I take 60 milligrams of dexedrine, extended release twice a day. He's like, wow, that's a lot of attention medicine. She's like, it's not attention medicine. It's stay awake medicine. He said, it's not stay awake medicine. It's attention medicine. She said, well, I take it to stay awake. He said, well, it's not for staying awake. It's for paying attention. He said, well, I can't stay awake if I don't take it. He said, let's send you for a sleep study. And she had sleep apnea.
Wow.
Of course she couldn't stay awake all day. And of course she couldn't focus because she couldn't sleep. Wow. So we're busy giving her uppers when she needed a CPAP. So, but the symptoms are the same, right? So if you list the symptoms rather than diagnose, right? If you could say this child has a hard time paying attention and falls asleep in the middle of the day and can't finish a task and can't keep track of things, then you could say, what causes that? Once you land on ADD, then you just give Adderall for that. But once you keep it a bouquet of symptoms and say, what can you do with this bouquet of symptoms? Sometimes you can treat it with Adderall, but you might also be looking at what else needs, like what's her quality of sleep like, or whatever it is. But if you keep it in bouquet of symptoms rather than landing on a diagnosis, then you have more capacity to deal with other therapies that work with that bouquet of symptoms. And you don't have to diagnose. So I think that's a very important thing that I've learned as a mother of a mentally ill child. Anyway, back to this child who in 6th grade started to love computers, broke a lot of them, lost a ton of data, and then became an expert. But on his way to losing all of our data, photographs, and everything, as he took apart every computer in the house and put them back together and became an expert, he had to do a PowerPoint presentation on how he feels about school. So he did. And it was called The Vortex of Swirling Evil. Right. So I didn't know. He did the PowerPoint presentation himself. He's a computer genius, right? Off he goes to school, and the teacher says, "Who wants to present?" He raises his hand, and he presents The Vortex of Swirling Evil. Now, this is in Colorado, just a couple of years after the Columbine shooting. His teacher freaks out. He gets kicked out of school and had to be certified by a psychiatrist to come back in.
Wow.
And meanwhile, so I drive to pick him up, and as I'm driving him home, I asked him what's going on for him. And we started to talk about things, and he was in a dual curriculum of 2 languages, and he just felt like the 2 languages was too hard to handle. And he was, and I learned from him in going through that thing that he was twice exceptional. And twice exceptional, I had kids with learning disabilities, but I never really thought of it as an exception. And so this is what I learned through him, is that he had 2 exceptions. The A definition of learning disability is a 30-point or more distance between one's IQ and one's ability to manifest it. If somebody's low IQ, that's not a learning disability. They're just low IQ. But if somebody has a higher IQ than they can operate at, they're disabled from their IQ to be able to manifest their IQ. So he had a learning disability, but he also had very high IQ. So his IQ was so high that he was manifesting a kind of regular in the classroom. But all his teachers saw he was so smart that they knew that he was lazy. Because what else could it be when a kid's so smart, but they're only manifesting regular? They didn't see that that was a learning disability. So anyway, it was just a whole long pathway of figuring this child out. Put him in a different school with just 1 curriculum. And his teacher sent me home a note that day, first day in the new school, that Donnie was a rock star and she loves his quirky personality. I was like, quirky? What a great word is quirky. It's like not pejorative. It's just descriptive. It's not weird. It's not abnormal. It's not what's wrong with your kid. It's just he's quirky. And it was fantastic to have a quirky kid and just like a name that I could just like could own it with him. And he did much better in that school. And still, I mean, he went ups and downs, but he did spiral at the end of I think the first year. And he had to be hospitalized. It was his first time in a mental hospital, only time actually in a mental hospital. But the quirky genius that he was. So he told me as I visited him there, every day they come and they ask me, am I hearing voices? And I say, no, I'm not. And neither am I. And then, he was this computer genius. So it's a locked ward. So he looks at the door, and he was a hacker. He totally knew how to hack everything computers in every space and life. So he looked at the door and he told the nurse, he said, if you just take a little piece of tinfoil and put it right over there on the electrical cord on the side of the door, it'll short the wires and the doors will be unlocked. And she's like, please don't tell anybody that. That's my boy. Yeah. Then he came home from the hospital and he had tried there for the first time ranch salad dressing. And he asked me to buy ranch salad dressing, so I did. It wasn't a usual staple in our house. He took it out of the fridge and he said, Ema, the first time I tried ranch dressing was in the psych ward. And now I'm crazy about it.
So he had an amazing sense of humor.
An amazing sense of humor. He really did. He really did. And I was thinking about it. When you said he battled mental illness, I'm not sure that he did. He lived with it. And he didn't want to live with it. But unlike many, he didn't really battle it. Like I'm dealing right now with another mentally ill child, teen. He's a whatever 18-year-old, and in the neighborhood. And I thought to myself, why should I get involved with another like teenager who's mentally ill and might die? Like I need that in my life, like to invest in another child who might not make it because this one's really having a hard time. And he is battling it. He doesn't want to die. This one. He's so clear that he's suicidal some days and he doesn't want to die. My son was so clear he did want to die. Like every day. And so when he would wake up and just say, really? Why am I awake again? I don't want to be here. He didn't want to kill himself. He just didn't want to be alive. And he tried to think of lots of ways for somebody else to kill him. And he's told me about it. It's like, should I go into, like, we lived near like some gang activity, not too far away. It's like, should I just wear like the wrong colors into that neighborhood? Like, what should I do so that I don't have to do it? He didn't want to have to actually kill himself, but he didn't want to be alive. So he wasn't really battling it. He lived with it, and he didn't like living with it, but he knew he had it. And he tried different medications, and he tried different things, and he did go to therapy, but nothing really helped. He was not happy to be in this world. And he and I would talk about it. He told me, he said, Ema, when I kill myself, and he said, and it's not going to be because I don't love you or because I don't feel loved by you. I do. I'm in too much pain to stay in this world. It was a straight up conversation, just like that, straight up, just like that. No emotions. Like that's the Asperger's part.
When you told me that when I interviewed you a few years ago, it stayed with me. Because I think that this was probably the most amazing gift he could have given you. No? Like
right. To say it's not our fault.
Right. For you to know how much he loved you and that it had nothing to do with you.
Right. It didn't. And he was so clear about that. He was like, and he asked me, I did tell you this, but he asked me, he said, so when I do kill myself, and he was straight up just like this, what's your preferred method? I was like, prefer not. He says, yeah, but I said, well, I can't tell you preferred method because I don't want you to die. But I could tell you my least preferred methods. I said, please don't shoot yourself because I don't want to have to find that. And please don't hang yourself because I don't want to have to find that. So when he did die, he swallowed poison. And even in his death, which of course I didn't want, I knew that he was taking care of me. Like he asked. Mm-hmm. And he chose a way that was less messy so that I wouldn't have to find that. And I did find him. But it's less messy. And I didn't know what he had taken. And I called 911 and they told me to initiate CPR. I was like, oh no, I'm not doing that because I don't know what he swallowed. And there's no way I could put my mouth on his mouth and risk 2 deaths. I can't. And the lady on the phone was mad at me, but I knew he swallowed something and I knew it was potent because he wasn't fooling around. And I just wasn't going to risk getting any of whatever it was that he took. And the paramedics came and he was still alive and they took him to the hospital, but it didn't take too long. They didn't know exactly what he took at first and they couldn't pull him through. But I knew that's what he wanted. It's not what I wanted. But in those conversations, he said, we sat and we talked. And he said, give me one good reason to stay alive. And I talked about all kinds of things. You're so smart. You're so bright. You can change the world. You're with your computer abilities. Like you can work for the government. You can hack anything. You can expose holes in all security. You can whatever you want. You want to work for Google. You want to work whatever everybody wants a brain like yours. Like you could have your choice of whatever. He wasn't interested. He just didn't want to go forward. There's nothing. And we looked online for reasons to live. There's just wasn't interested. And so it boiled down to, I didn't want him to die. So he said, are you telling me that I should live in pain to spare you the pain of burying me? Yes.
I remember when you told me that is such a strong, what do you answer to that?
Right. I said yes, because that's what you're supposed to say, but I heard it. I really did. What am I asking him to do? Live a life of pain? And I also realized I have positive chemistry. I'm blessed with positive chemistry. I wake up every morning happy to be alive. I don't always jump out of bed, but I pretty much spring out of bed. I'm happy that I'm here every day, even on hard days. I'm happy that I'm here. And he woke up feeling the opposite. And I realized it's not me that I worked on that. Yes, I've worked on different things, but a lot is chemistry. It's just a bracha, it's just a blessing in my life. I asked one skinny lady, clearly I have a few extra pounds going on over here, and I asked one skinny lady who's about my age, I said, like, how do you do it? And she said, it's genes. I was like, oh, thank you for an honest answer. You're telling me about your diet and working out and how you get up every day. And like, you have good genes. Okay, great. I don't have those genes.
Aliza, patting means softer hugs.
That's right. So I provide soft, yummy
I
hugs.
tried on that. I do that very well.
So I have soft, yummy hugs.
Exactly.
So, but I have good genes, the happiness genes.
I remember when I asked you in our interview, because you do have a life with a lot of tests and a lot of challenges. And I remember when I called you to have our first interview, you asked me, which of my tragedies do you want to talk about? That was such a wake-up call for me. Wow, And I wanted to talk about Donnie for a few reasons. One, because I know that people are afraid to talk about people that passed, and especially under those circumstances, but how important it is to talk and keep Donnie's memory alive. I think that he was a blessing for the short period of time that he was here. It wasn't easy, but he brought something into this world, and talking about him, he's here. He's continuing on, and he's sending a message that's really important. The other reason that I wanted to talk about it was because so many people hide and don't share about mental illness and suicide. And this is a stigma. This is a topic, and you speak so openly with such an ease. You make everybody around you comfortable discussing something so complicated, so difficult. It's a blessing, because the people who are not impacted by mental illness and suicide, we don't know. We don't know what to say. We don't know what to do. We don't know. And the more we have these conversations, we'll break the stigma, and we'll know how to hold your heart and how to support. You told me something incredible in our first conversation, because I told you I wanted to talk about Donnie's suicide. And you said to me, Miriam, we need to talk about Donnie's, what it was to raise a child with mental illness, because suicide was one moment, but raising a child with mental illness, it was a longer period.
Yeah, it's so hard raising a child with mental illness. And in a way, when he died, I felt almost guilty. I felt like an older single woman who got engaged and left her friends behind. Because there is this sorority of suffering of the older single women who are wishing to get married. They're 30, they're 35, they're 40. And then one of the 38-year-olds gets engaged and leaves them behind. She's now moving into the next stage. And I felt that way a little bit, leaving behind the sorority of mothers of mentally ill children. Mm-hmm. Because now I didn't have to deal with it anymore. It was over. Now I have to deal with the sorrow, but I didn't have to deal with worrying every day. And I didn't even realize how much I was worrying every day. I mean, I definitely worried there were times when I worried if it would be if he would take me with him. And I was definitely worried for that. There were times I locked my bedroom door at night when I would go to sleep. And I would just talk to God and say, okay, God, wasn't the best day. And I'd really rather not die at his hands. I mean, and I would just explain to God, just to make sure he understood, like, I take care of a lot of people. I give solace to a lot of people. I counsel a lot of people. A lot of people are counting on me. It would not be good for any of them if they would find out in the morning that I was murdered by my son. So if you could just make it that I could sleep peacefully, I'd really appreciate that. But I realized I just had to go to sleep. Like, after I'd say my little prayer, like, then I have to, even though I locked my door, like, what? He could just bang it down. Then instead of waking up by being stabbed, I'd wake up by hearing the door and then get stabbed. Like, and I had those thoughts at night, and I just have to think, you know what? I just have to, like, put my life in God's hands, because I'm not sleeping in a hotel every night. Like, this is my home, and this is my life. This is where I live. He's downstairs, and there's good days and there's hard days. So that's what it is.
When he passed, so let me go back. Last week we had a Michelle here speaking with us. Her husband died of a suicide. And the family immediately agreed that they were not going to tell the truth. And for 10 years, she had to grieve for the death of a husband through an accident. And she was not able to grieve properly because it was a charade. And I know you told me that people talked about, like, what are we going to say? And you said, we're going to tell the truth.
That's right. And in the hospital, somebody came to us, one of our community mentors came to us and said, let's think about, what we can tell the community. And my husband and I were like, we know what we're going to tell the community. He had mental illness and he died of it. That's our story and we're sticking with it. That's what happened. And we were straight up. And our community embraced us. Really, people heard it and embraced us in that. And we were very straight. So one way that I help people with it, because some people really feel like, oh my gosh, suicide, it's a coward's way out. You don't want to live in pain. So this is a story that I tell. It's a parable, but I think it's helpful to understand. Somewhere in Africa today is a 16-year-old girl who's running for her life. Why is she running? She's in a war-torn country and her parents were abducted in front of her and thrown into her hut where they lived as a family. And the hut was burned to the ground with her parents in it. And her younger brother was abducted and pressed into army service as a boy. And she was raped, but she escaped. And with nothing, no shoes on her feet, nothing in her hands, and no place to go, she's running for her life. Why? There's that girl somewhere in Africa. Why is she running for her life? Because she wants to live. She wants to live. She has no parents. She has no siblings. She has no place to go. She has nothing. But she wants to make a life for herself because her inner drive is, I want to live. If a child in this country who comes from a loving family with every opportunity says, I don't want to be alive. If a husband in a marriage that's probably mostly loving, most marriages are mixed. There's good times and hard times, but overall, hopefully good. With a job, a career, parents, friends, whatever it is, if they choose to die, something's wrong. Nobody wants to die. In the Holocaust, there were hardly any suicides. Really, you only want to die if something's really broken. That's an illness. We don't tell people with a pancreas that's not working, well, buck up, make that pancreas should make some more insulin. Let's go. No, we give it insulin. We try to balance it. And it doesn't always work, but at least we know what to do. We can do a blood test with a pancreas. We can't do a blood test with the brain. We don't even know how brains work yet. We call it mental illness. Think about it. We call hearts and pancreases and lungs all different things. We don't say, oh, she died of body illness. No, she died of diabetes, she died of cancer of the brain, she died of whatever it is, not body illness. So with brains, we lump the whole thing together, mental illness, because we actually don't really know. We have a few different names for things, but we don't know how it works. We don't know how our brains work yet in order to balance them with chemicals. It's all a mystery. And some of the chemicals make us want to die more, and some of us want to make them live more, and some people die on the way to wanting to live. Look, it's a mess, all the stuff that we do. So that's number one, is just to understand if somebody wants to die, something's wrong with them. So you can't blame them. It's not the coward's way out. Maybe the person that lost $100 million in a hedge fund, and for that day was nervous about being caught. Okay, maybe. But if they could get over that one day of sorrow. But in general, and certainly for my son, I felt like it was a cancer death. I was waiting for years for him to die, just waiting, every day, tiptoeing downstairs to wake him up in the morning and what am I going to find when I turn the corner, alive or dead? Every day. So that's number one, just to you're living with always wondering. I will say for anybody listening that I did a lot of reading about suicide after he died, wondering why I didn't do so much before, even though I knew, I just didn't think to become an expert in it. Not that I am now, but I read a lot of books. The book that helped me the most was Danielle Steele's book. And I never read another Danielle Steele book, but she lost a son to suicide, a 19-year-old, Nick Trainer. So it's called His Bright Light. And it's about her life with him. It's her firstborn. And she had many children. She's Catholic. She had many children after that. and she became wealthy. Actually, he was born to her before she was wealthy, but he was a teenager with her when she was wealthy. And she hired bodyguards for him. He had a garage band, and so she hired 2 lifeguards to keep track of him, make sure he wouldn't kill himself. She even hired a second mother for him from one of the in-house treatment facilities that he went to. But he managed. In the 20 minutes that he was left alone somewhere, he managed. And after I read that book, I felt like, you know what? She had everything at her fingertips. Every treatment center, every bodyguard, every drug, every love. And she loved him, and he was a loved child. But he was born mentally ill, her child, and mine too. Look that. And even with diabetes, you might be born with it. You just don't see it for 50 years. Right? So just because somebody's not crazy as a child doesn't mean they're not going to have something going on at 50 or 30 or 24 or 70, right? Who knows? So, so I think to have a lot more compassion when somebody dies of brain disease. It's a brain disease.
I, I want you to share with me your strength in your faith, that no matter what happens, it's unshakable. It is unwavering. Um, when I went to adversity, you were the person that I called because I felt so unloved. And with one sentence, you showed me how it was the opposite, how loved I was. It was such an important moment in my trajectory that I write it in my book because it changed my perspective and how I saw what I was going through. How do you have this ability to really keep the faith always there? I don't know. Do you ever question? Do you ever doubt?
I don't. I don't. I might get mad. I was mad at God briefly, not for Donnie, but when my daughter lost her son, her 1-year-old son, who is named partially after Donnie, right? He was born, my son was Daniel Moshe, and her son was named Moshe Nehemiah. So Moshe was named after Donnie, and Nehemiah was named after my father-in-law, who had passed away the year before. So this child's carrying 2 names. And within 6 weeks after birth, we find out he has a terrible seizure disorder, and he just suffered until he died. It took a year. He was awake and crying or asleep from morphine and peaceful. So sleeping peacefully on drugs or awake and in pain for a year. And it's interesting because when I went to take care of my daughter while that we were waiting for her son to die, it took when we knew he no longer could take anything in, like even through his feeding tubes, like everything just kept coming up. And finally the doctor said, like, just the only thing you should put down those tubes is morphine to keep him out of pain, but no more liquids and no more nutrition because he can't digest it. His body's shutting down. So I was there waiting every day, and it took a month actually. I'm there with my little 3-year-old granddaughter. She had 2 older sisters. I'm brushing the hair of my 3-year-old firecracker granddaughter. And I told her, I said, "You have such a special mother. You're so lucky." She said, "Why is she special?" I said, "Well, she loves you so much and she takes such good care of you. She's such a special mother." And my granddaughter said, "That's not what makes my mother special." I said, "It's not? What makes her special?" She said, "No, my mother's special because she has a baby that, God willing, is going to get dead soon." I'm like, you're listening to all the conversations of all the adults around you that go over to my daughter and say, "Sarah, you're so special. How you take care of that baby." So she knew that's what made her mother special, is that she has a dying baby. Meanwhile, the same girl is saying poopy face a lot. And we're trying to get her to not say that. And we're telling her stories about little girls who say words like that. They don't have as many friends. They don't do as well in school. And when they learn to not say those words, they do much better. And she still knows that that's a word she could say. It's a good insult. So as I'm standing behind my daughter now, after her baby died, I'm standing behind her. We're in the cemetery. So there's this tiny little casket going into the ground, and then my daughter, and then me behind watching the whole scene. And I just felt like, poopy face, Hashem. I was mad at God for a minute, and I felt like, okay, I'll call him a name. I didn't lose my faith that he did it. That's why I called him a name. And do I want to admit it to everybody? So I did apologize later. But that's part of being in a real relationship. Is sometimes you get mad in a real relationship and say, and I told God, I said, I signed up for Jewish leadership. Like, I get that you made workshops for me to grow through. But did she sign up? Is that nice? You have to take her son too. I really don't approve of that. And who knows if she signed up or not? Maybe she did. Maybe she did. And I found it fascinating. She told me, my daughter told me, that I said, Ima, do you remember you told me that story a long time ago of the Hasidic rabbi who went into the forest with his Hasidim behind him, and they found there was a little house in the forest, and they knock on the door, and there's a couple that has a brand new baby, 8 days old, and they came and they did the circumcision, and all the men were in the front of the little hut having a little shot of vodka to celebrate, and the mother went in the back to nurse, and all of a sudden they hear a scream and a thud. They go in the back, and they see the mother has fainted, the baby is dead. So the same group of men, they go, they dig a hole in the ground, they bury the baby, they say the mourner's prayer, and home they go. And the men are asking their rabbi, like, what was that? And the rabbi said, well, actually, that baby was the reincarnation of Rabbi Joseph Cairo from Tzfat, who lived in the 1600s. He was one of our great scholars, and he was circumcised not at 8 days, but at 3 months old, because he was born during a time of plague, and he couldn't be circumcised on time. So all he needed was to be circumcised on time. That's all he needed. He came into the world to be circumcised on time, and that's all he needed. Okay, that was a story that I heard. Nobody says, well, what about the mother? She's left without a baby. Very nice, the baby got what it needed, but the mother, meanwhile, had to carry for 9 months and mourn a lost child. But anyway, that story, my daughter said, do you remember that story you told me? She said, well, I'm thinking maybe my baby really is Donnie's reincarnation. And maybe all he needs is to die a natural death. And if that's what I could do for him, if I could hold him and carry him until he has a natural death, I could do that for Donnie. So she felt like that. And meanwhile, that baby died very close to, well, it's hard to explain in this context, but that baby died on a day where there's a candle lit for Donnie, the second day of Shavuos. And there's a candle lit for Donnie's soul, and that baby died on that day. And when a Jew dies, you light a candle at their head, open the window, cover their face. So she opened the window, covered their face, but she couldn't light a candle because it was a Jewish holiday. But you can transfer a flame. There's only one flame in the house, and that was Donnie's flame. So it went straight from Donnie's flame to this baby's flame. And I thought about it afterwards, like, both boys died of brain disorders. Just one has stigma and one doesn't. Nobody blamed her for giving birth to a child with electrical disorders in his brain that caused him to seize 40 times a minute. Nobody said, what kind of a mother are you? A child that's constantly doing that all the time. Like, what kind of a mother gives birth to a child like that? Instead, everybody said, oh, sorry, you're so special. So, yeah.
What can we do? What can people do to do their part to stop the stigma? What is it? How do we explain? How do we speak? How do we conduct ourselves? So slowly but surely we can break the stigma of mental illness.
Okay, so I have a second little parable to tell about mental illness that I think is helpful. For me, the way to look at mental illness is kind of like asthma. So asthma is a physical illness that doesn't usually go away. If you have it for life. You may grow up with your lungs getting a little bit bigger. It might be easier as an adult than as a child to deal with asthma. But usually if you have it for life. Now, asthma is a very broad spectrum. There are some people who need an inhaler in their life, not in their purse, right? Just they keep in their medicine cabinet or in the back of their medicine cabinet, under their bed somewhere. Like they only need it once a month or once a quarter, but they have it for that occasional time they need it. They have asthma. Then there are people who have an inhaler in their purse. It's there all the time. Then there's those who have it in their purse, in their glove compartment, in their medicine cabinet, and next to their bed, right? They're not using it every day, but they use it quite a few times a week, and they don't want to be caught without it. Then there are the people who realize they should not be using it several times a week, a rescue inhaler. They need to actually take a pill, singular, every day, and possibly a steroid inhaler, Ceravent or something like that, every day to kind of keep it smooth. But even with that, they still need their rescue inhaler every once in a while. Even with that, some of the people further along the spectrum, they need to nebulize a few times a year, 3 times a day. And even some of those people, they need oral steroids, really, to bring it under control. And some of those people get hospitalized because all that stuff doesn't work. And it might not be every year, but might be every other or third year they're hospitalized, or they have to run to the hospital, get some epinephrine or something like that. Their asthma breaks through everything. But if that person can learn about themselves, which therapies work well for them, sometimes a hot shower with steam works, more sleep might work, and they learn their triggers. Cats, forget about it. Stay away from cats. Hay fever, you can't really avoid it. So you have to know what to do in the springtime or the fall when you're triggered. So if you learn your triggers and your therapies, you can pretty much live with asthma, right? It works in your life. Even if you have it pretty bad, even if you have to be hospitalized once in a while, you can live a very good life with asthma. Same thing with mental illness. There's a very broad spectrum. There's people right on the, just on the edge of normal, people who they don't like sticky things. They're not really OCD, but sticky things, no way. They didn't finger paint as children. They hated Band-Aids when they got shots. They don't put Scotch tape on things. That's our whole thing. Just nothing sticky. Okay, it's the tiniest little bit of mental illness, but it is. It's like a little mental hiccup, right? So you could be there all the way to you count your ice cubes in a glass, literally. I had a friend once who told me, she said, "See that?" I'm like, "What?" She said, "I put 4 ice cubes in a glass." She said, "I always put an odd." She said, "This was a triumph for me." I'm like, "Okay, then you go. 4 ice cubes is fantastic." Right? So, and it becomes mental illness when it gets in your way of living, of loving. When it gets in your way of loving or working, that's really when it's an illness and not like a cold, right? But there's this whole big spectrum. And if you learn your triggers and your therapies, I used to say triggers and meds, but therapies, because meds are part of the therapies. It could be art, it could be music, it could be prayer, it could be friends, it could be exercise. There's so many therapies for mental illness. If you learn your triggers and your therapies, you could live a pretty good life, even with pretty serious mental illness, even if there's breakthrough problems. So once you understand that about a lot of people or about yourself, then you could have compassion and say, you know what, you could live a good life. Let me help. Do you want help? Let's say you're living with somebody with mental illness. Ask their permission. Would you like help monitoring this? Because sometimes I could see when you're heading down before you could see it. Do you want me to say something? Some people hate it when you say, "Did you take your meds today?" No, that's so annoying. But if you can make a partnership and say, we both want a healthy, happy life together, what's going on for you? I noticed that, or whatever, and you have a conversation about it. The same way you do with somebody who broke their leg. Can I get the door for you? Well, sure. Can I help you into the car? Can I carry the packages? Yes, we help each other when something's not working 100%. And if it's not working 100% forever, like my son-in-law, who's a quadriplegic in a wheelchair, but has a beautiful family, right? So his body's not working. It's never going to get better. I mean, science and God should make it better, please. But for right now, with the science that we know currently, and with God's current, this very minute decree, it's still quadriplegia in a chair.
Right? And I have to interrupt you because we don't have time for that story.
No, we're not telling that story.
But that story is a story worth hearing. So at some point, either Eliza will come back or we'll share the story, because Eliza's daughter married him after he was a quadriplegic. He didn't become a quadriplegic after they were married. And that is really a most inspiring story. So I just wanted that as a side note.
Anyway, we help each other when we can't do it all by ourselves. Men who are stronger put our suitcases up for us. I love being a grandmother now that I get asked for that. I couldn't do that before, but now I can say, I'm a grandmother. Do you mind putting my suitcase up for me? It's a little heavy. So, but whatever, we help each other when we can't do it by ourselves, and it's okay. So to say, you know what, there's different things that go wrong in a body or that aren't going all the way right. Let's help each other. So I think just to say it, can I help you out with that? Can I make the room quieter? Could I take away that annoying thing? Are you having a hard time with a test? Can we slow it down? Like whatever, like what does somebody need to do well? How can we create an environment in which people thrive? So I think that's what we have to have that compassion for people to create environments in which others thrive. That's one of my mottos is creating space in which others flourish. That's what I try to do. Create space in which others flourish. So I try to be a space creator for flourishing.
Beautiful.
So,
I hear that the sound is bad. Can you hear me well?
I hear you well.
Hear me well? Okay, let's continue trying this. What I would like is this last 10 minutes that we have, if anybody has a question, to ask it now. It's very hard for me to scroll all the way back up, and I was not posting all the questions. I'm assuming that Aliza will be able to read all of them later after, but I didn't want to interrupt her train of thought with the thoughts that was coming. But if anybody has a question, Paul is saying that it's echoing. Anybody else hears it echoing? Can you hear me? Okay. Anybody has a question?
While you're thinking of your questions, I'll tell you one song that helped me a lot all the years, and that's Stevie Wonder's Just Go Have a Talk with God. So just mentioning, in case anybody likes Stevie Wonder, I just found that so helpful. And I used to sing it to myself a lot.
What are the lyrics?
There's a free psychiatrist that's known throughout the world, solving all the problems of little boys and girls. When you feel your life's too hard, just go have a talk with God. When your load's too hard to bear, just go talk to God. He cares. So,
Beautiful.
And more, but like that's the basic lyrics. And I just loved it, just to know that like there's a God and he cares. And for me, because you asked about the faith part, just to know that God doesn't make mistakes. And he loves me. So he only is doing everything to bring out the best. And it might feel hard, but it isn't bad. It's just hard. So, yeah.
Okay. Aliza, you read it because
Okay.
I'm going.
Did I always have such great perspective while I was in the midst of your son's mental illness? Yeah, I did. I mean, I worked really hard on it. That's why I started by telling you the story of my ADD child who was everywhere all the time to me. And today runs a jewelry store and doesn't even need security cameras because he's everywhere all the time. It's fabulous as an adult. It was so hard as a child. He does have security cameras. But I started gaining that perspective. I mean, God gave me little workshops along the way before he gave me this graduate level one. But yeah, to really work on God knows best. And my job is to just do my best with what he gives me. Is it selfish to want him to live if he's not truly happy? I don't think it is. You don't have to deny your feelings just because somebody has different feelings. I think, there might be a place where you could say it's selfish to force somebody to do something. But I think with human beings, we do as much as we can force them to live. We don't give them the space. I don't, me personally, I don't believe in assisted suicide. But that being said, somebody who wants to die and you want them to live, I think it's totally okay to say, I love you so much. I don't ever want you to go. You're so important to me. And that's not selfish. Not selfish. They're allowed to say, I am in too much pain to live here. And you're allowed to say, I would be in so much pain if you left. And let me tell you, it hurts a lot when they leave. I did not realize how much it would hurt. I just think about so many mothers who will say when their children are dying of cancer, I wish I could trade places. I would take on his pain. And I feel like I didn't say that, but I feel like I did take on a lot of the pain. It's very, very painful to live with a dead child. No question about it. I missed much of this, but we'll go back and listen. Lost my dad to suicide. How old was your son? He was 19 and 3 months, 19 years and 3 months. My husband is often depressed and my son is sometimes feeling not worthy. I'm drained trying to help them all. Suggestions for survivors and supportive for depressed. Yeah, so I personally would rather not call myself a survivor. I joined and dropped out of the SOS group, Survivors of Suicide. I feel like a survivor of suicide is somebody who tried and failed and then decided to live. That's somebody who survived suicide. I am not a survivor. I'm a thriver. And that's who I am in my life. So, but it is draining. There's no question about it. You have to take care of yourself and you have to get the love that you need. Friendships, you can't take on, that's something I think is, you can't take on making them live. It's not your job. It's their job to live. It's your job to create the best environment that you can. But I feel like we can't babysit all day long and then be miserable with ourselves if we weren't in the house for the 30 minutes that it happens or something like that, because that's not a life either. You have to live. So I do feel like God puts us together for our soul's best purpose with whoever we need to be with. We could have been put with a different husband. God could pick from anybody anywhere on the planet, and not just anybody anywhere on the planet, but anybody throughout history and anybody in the future could have been matched with my soul. And that's for my husband, and that's for each of my kids. So I know that each one was custom matched with me. So that helps me just to know, just God, you gave me this kid, please help me carry him. You gave me this husband, please help me live with him. You made the perfect match, please help me work hard and make it work. And it doesn't always work just because you work hard. I have anxiety and depression, and I feel like most can't understand it even when explained. What would be the way to really educate someone that may be stigmatized and can't fully understand if there's a way? Loaded question. That's actually why I gave the asthma parable. I think that's really helpful. Pretty much everybody understands asthma, and very few people fault asthmatics for having it. Although I'll just say, as somebody who has asthma and food allergies, it would drive my husband nuts sometimes when I would eat things I was not supposed to eat, and I'd be wheezing away. He did blame me for having it. But in general, people don't blame the asthmatic for their asthma. So if you can use that parable, and what's so great about asthma as a parable is that there is that long spectrum of a little bit of asthma to it will kill you kind of asthma, to everything in between. And there's meds for it, and the meds don't always work. And there's other triggers. That's a great parable because of all those layers. So if you could explain to somebody that you're living with a physical ailment that is a chemical imbalance in your brain that causes these reactions, and you're doing your best to try to figure it out, but you don't know it all, and you can't, and science doesn't know it all. There's not a magic pill for anxiety and depression. There's all kinds of pills, and none of them are magic. So we're just not there yet in our science. So we just have to wait until we get there, and we're not there yet.
Incredible. Anybody? It's that point. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any last questions?
Well, one of the things I wanted to say, especially for any Jewish listeners, but for every listener, but I'll give a Jewish parable for it. I think an important concept here of how you get through these hard places is a phrase. The path to wholeness is through the broken. It's through you can't go around the broken. You have to go through it. And we hear it in the synagogue, or this year outside the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, in the sounds of the shofar. The shofar has a special blast, shofar blasts on Rosh Hashanah, and they go in sets of whole, broken, whole. Tekiah, shvarim, tekiah. It's whole, broken, whole. Tekiah, trua, tekiah. Whole, broken, whole. So there's these sets of whole, broken, whole. And they end with a long, whole note. And I feel like that's our journey in this world, is we go from whole to broken. And if we go through the broken, we get the whole on the other side. But the whole that we get to on the other side, it's temporary. And we go from whole again to broken again. And our job is to go from whole through broken to whole, whole through broken to whole, until we get to the ultimate wholeness as our soul leaves this world, having achieved what it's achieved by going through all this broken. And that's what we're here for, is to go through it and become whole in a different way. Healing with gold, right? A different kind of whole, right? A different kind of whole than was before the broken. So, and that's the whole point, is to come to a different kind of wholeness. And it doesn't mean you're not going to be broken again, but there's a different kind of wholeness on the other side of that. And the only way to get there is to move through the broken. So I'll end with everyone giving you all a blessing that you should have the strength and the love and the clarity and all the resources that you need to move through the broken in your lives to get to the whole, and know that you could do it, to get to a whole and keep on going forward.
And that is why you are one of the people that I love and cherish the most, that gave me so much hope when I was so broken. So I could, you were instrumental into my healing journey. And I am so happy to bring you to speak to this group that I'm creating, that it's a place for people to unite together through their own journeys. So all of us together can become whole. Thank you so much, Eliza.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mary.
Bye, everybody.